Morning, I'm Bob Brown, and I'm here with a variety of wonderful people that I'm going to let our moderator, our happy moderator, uh, live from Florida, right?
No, I'm back in Seattle.
Okay, I should have noticed the water dripping down the side of the house. Okay. Karen, I turn it over to you and say, have a happy, wonderful morning.
Thank you. And I will, because I've got really interesting people on Bob's show today. We're going to be talking about some exciting new fiction. All of these authors have new books out. They have a one. This is an exciting time for women in speculative fiction and thrillers. And I'm going to be turning it over to Brenda Clough, Sara Stamey, and Phyllis Irene Radford to tell you a little bit about what they're doing and what they're excited about. Bob didn't do a big introduction about B Cube Press. So if you are in our audience and you're new to this group, B Cube Press was started about 6 years ago by Bob Brown. And we've put out about a dozen books, most of them anthologies, with a definite speculative fiction and a vaguely political tinge to most of them. And I urge you to go and look at our webpage where you can find short descriptions of all the books, links to ways you can buy the books, plus the calls for submissions, because we have some anthologies that are open and that are looking for stories. So welcome to my authors, and I'm going to start with Brenda Clough and ask you to tell us a little bit about what you are excited about, what you have just published, and what you've just won.
Well, I wrote a book during 2020 and 2021, and and they published it. I entered it for the Diverse Voices Award, which has just been inaugurated by Grandview University. And the idea was they were going to have they wanted they wanted an ethnic author who was writing about ethnic characters. Hello, that's me. And, it's like, doo-doo. So I sent the manuscript in and forgot all about it. And then I won. And so they flew me to Des Moines, Iowa, and, stuff. And they published it, and so here it is. I'm still trying to get a link over onto the messages. I have not quite figured that out yet, but it's here, and it is going to be. They're running it through Ingram, so it'll be eventually up everywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, but they haven't wound themselves through the maze of Ingram just yet. Ooh. But it is available at the university bookstore, and if I could figure out how to get into the messages, I would put up the link. But I too am trying to do two things at once, and I haven't figured it out yet.
This is the university bookstore in Seattle.
No, this is the university bookstore at Grandview University in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay. Yes.
So, because at this moment, that's the only bunch of people who have it. And I guess I should talk about the book itself.
Well, let's hold off on this.
Okay.
I'll give you a chance to do that. Let's go over to Sara, who is new to the B Cube Press Sunday morning. Welcome, Sara. Tell us a little bit about your news, your latest book, and your latest award.
All right. Thank you. Happy to be here. I'm just going to warn people that I had surgery 3 days ago. And so if I have to close early, I might just do that. But so far, so good.
Don't worry.
Yeah. Well, I have a couple of recent novels that won awards from the Chanticleer Awards. And the one that's more speculative fiction is The Ariadne Connection. That's set in the Greek islands, where I traveled a lot and love it, and has global. It won the Global Thriller Grand Prize. And then the one that came out recently with Bookview Cafe, both these are Bookview Cafe, was Pause, which is a totally different type of book than I've ever written. But this is the one that tackles the issues of, things that we don't talk about. And I'm excited to talk about those things.
We'll get back to you on that. That is intriguing. And Phyllis, over to you. And in your introduction, could you talk a little bit about Bookview Cafe, which Sara just referred to?
Okay. I see. I think all three of us are founding members or close to founding members.
Mhm.
No, Sara, you came in a little later.
Yeah.
We started back in about '08, where a bunch of us belonged to a Yahoo group of science fiction fantasy female writers.
Mhm.
And it was run by Laura Resnick. And 3 or 4 of us, all about the same time, posed the question, how do I improve my online visibility?
And the issue of backlist, you had a whack ton of books that New York had decided to quit pushing. I had a bunch of stuff, and we all had the same problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so just posing that question generated a bullet list about 5 pages long of successful websites and what they did. And there was, well, I can do that, but there's no way I can do that. Well, I can help you with this if you can help me with this. And we got the list down to a manageable size. I think we started out with 24, and it's quickly reduced to about 18 women in science fiction fantasy. And we've cooperated in building this website. All of us had a job to do. But that was it. And by spreading out the work over 18 people, we managed to get this website up and running. I think it was November 8th, 2008. And that week, we were the website to watch from the Guardian newspaper.
Yay.
That's how we remember where it is. You can always go back and search in the Guardian files and say, because the minute we did it, we're all so busy we forgot. When did we start? I don't know.
Yeah. And we posted new fiction every day on our blog.
Yeah.
They might be short stories. Nancy Jane Moore did a flash fiction a week.
She was so great.
Which is just insane, but she then compiled them into a book. And we each did something, and we got more exposure. And it took a little over a year for us to open our bookstore, which is now up and running very well, thank you. But the authors get like 90% of the proceeds.
Yes.
It's all volunteer. We all do something in the administration, the editing,
The software.
The software, managing the website, herding cats, whatever is necessary. We all share in that. And
Phyllis, tell us a little bit about what you are doing now.
what am I doing? Okay, I'm a regular here. Okay, in the machinations of big publishing in New York, Daw Books, who have been my mainstay since 1993, has merged with something else.
They were sold to China or someplace like that.
Yeah, I think it's Astra Publishing.
Right.
And the first thing they did was clean out the warehouse. And since they gave me back the rights to my first 20 books.
Wow.
I am with Brenda's help. I am
co-op.
Brenda's my proofreader. I'm getting them ready for reissue through the Book Review Cafe, primarily as ebooks, but we are also doing print editions. Maya Bonhoff is doing my covers. So Bob is supposed to have a copy of The Glass Dragon, the first one. I don't know if it'll show up today or not. I don't have physical copies because it's not coming out until June, end of June. But all of my classic early books, the 13
ones that made your name.
Yeah, as I'm coming out, they're all Irene Radford. And there's another very long story we'll do on another podcast about why I use that name to publish with. But Glass Dragon is pretty much ready to go and will be released to the wild on the last Tuesday in June, whatever that date is.
Mhm.
I think it's 27th. I'm not sure. And then they'll come one a month, at least through the end of this year. And then we get to start on the later books.
Yeah, it's a long haul, but you just have to bite it the apple one bite at a time.
Yeah,
We'll get them all out.
we'll get them all out. I may not be able to keep up the one a month, but I'm trying. I had hip replacement surgery 3.5 weeks ago, and I'm doing marvelously in my recovery. And I hope your surgery is just as easy to overcome as mine, Sara. But I'm up and about. I'm off pain pills.
Yay.
I'm moving around the house pretty much without assistance. But if I do leave the house, I do go with a walker and or a cane. So I'm doing very well. But I too have no attention span. I've had 3 surgeries in 6 months requiring anesthesia. Now, 2 cataracts were easy breezy, but they do require anesthesia, and it does mess with your brain.
It does.
So, anyway.
It is. You have to do your health. What is a writer without her eyes? You know.
Right.
You just have to do this. There's no way out but through.
Right. But at this point, reviewing old books is a lot easier than writing new. But my 50th book, I've done a rough draft and I've started in on the second draft. And as I look at marketing, I'm thinking after the 13 Dragon books, I will do the 4 Test Non Quare adventures, which is urban fantasy. And this 50th book is a spin-off of those. For the fans of Tess, she's in the book. She makes a couple cameo appearances. It's the same world where the reason there have been no authenticated demon sightings in the last 50 years is because they're all showing up at science fiction conventions and winning all costume prizes. And so this is the same world, but it's a different family involved, different problem. And I kind of may continue that theme. I may not. But Family Bedrock is very much my homage to the con culture, which is kind of fading, and I miss it. Yeah.
Are you guys going to a swift digression? You guys are going to Oricon, right?
Yes. I will
Yes.
be at Oricon. I am planning on starting driving on Tuesday. I'm going to take myself to the hairdresser. She lives. Her salon is 1 mile away.
Very good. You can't get lost with that. I am not going to be at Oricon because I'm supposed to be in Europe, and I can't get out of it. But next year I will be at Oricon, so I'm hoping to see everybody there.
Okay, but I don't know that I'll hit any other conventions before then. My goal is to be able to go to the beach and walk on the beach by my birthday in mid-September.
Okay.
You'll be able to do it.
Yeah.
You listen to your body, you know.
Yeah. Like I said, I'm within the house where I know where all of the walls and the furniture is that I can lean on if I have to. I'm moving without assistance.
Good.
So there's discomfort, but that's mostly weakness in the muscles. I'm starting PT soon.
You'll
find that will help a lot.
Yeah, I hope so.
Good.
So Brenda, you posted a link to an excerpt from A Door in His Head. Is that the opening of the book, or is it further in?
Well, that is the flashback to the heroes, where the hero began to get into his deep trouble. But the book does not begin there. Okay. One of the things that it's not really a fantasy novel, but this is one of the most. There's a couple of places where the cloven hoof of the fantasy writer does show through, and this is one of them.
Definitely.
And there's nothing, frankly, nothing like tests involving cobras to really brighten the writer's day. So,
Yes. I went and read the excerpt, and it was really hair raising.
Yes.
it is, but it wasn't as and that's what's you were Phil. You were talking about how you're doing a spin-off of your previous 4 books. This is sort of a spin-off of the Marion Halcombe Victorian thrillers, where it all took place in like the 1860s and 1870s, and they were doing extremely creative stuff. They're all Victorian thrillers. There's a lot of there's train accidents and attacks by crocodiles and diving for treasure in sea notes in Central America, and all the stuff of Victorian thrillers is there. But then I couldn't do it anymore. And
there's only 11 of those books.
Well, there are 11. And I should tell you that I should tell everyone the first volume is free. I'll post a link in a minute. But what happened finally was that the king of in this country, the imaginary country where they had to go and have adventures, is Singi in Southeast Asia. I made it up, so don't look for it on a map. But it's the king of they had really, because I could make it all up. That's why I made it up, so they could have a really good way to become king of this country. It is there's in the royal family, there's an inherited resistance to cobra venom. So how do you prove you're of the royal line? That thing bites you, you don't die. Easy. And of course, if you do die, sorry, but it's not like you're contending for the throne anymore. You are dead. And so it all works out great for them. But then the king of that period said, this is really, really kind of ick. This is civilized nations don't do this. We have to join the 19th century. And so he altered the rule a little bit, and he could do that because he was a king. And so so now in this excerpt, his son is essentially doing it, but fortunately it no longer involves being bit. And he's cool with that. Everyone's cool with that. So it's worse in the previous books. Now it's kind of scary, but at least you're not bit. And but then because I didn't want to write Victorian anymore, I fast forwarded to 1941, which was an extremely shitty year to be in Southeast Asia. December the 7th was Pearl Harbor. And on that day, the Japanese, essentially said, Asia, ours. And Pearl Harbor was to keep the Americans out. And they began moving south from Japan to, Korea, Hong Kong, all the way down to Singapore. So essentially they had the idea was they would have the whole Pacific Rim on their side. And they did that. And, that's what the whole of World War II is about. So we don't have to talk about it. But since Singi is right there, it was not nice. And the hero of this novel, Stephen, who is the in the excerpt with his boyhood name, his Asian name Daishin, he's trying to run the country while the Japanese have invaded, and it does not go well. And he finally, at the end of the war, he goes to California, and he's still really young. He's only 21 years old, but his life is shot. He's been thrown out of his country. He's he may be tried for war crimes in The Hague. He may be and he's severely injured, and he may never get better. And he's 21. And he can't support himself either. You arrive with nothing. You're nothing but the clothes on your back in San Francisco. And so this book is about how you get out of that. It is about surviving. It's about turning lemons into lemonade. It was a book I wrote in 2020 because at that instant in this country, it was scary. You remember that. This is just before the election in November 2020 and right after. We had not yet come up to January 6th, but yes, we were just about to do that. It was fucking scary. And this was the book that I wanted to write to say that we can get out of this. It's been worse before, and we've survived it. We can do this. We have to. We can't completely wet our pants and go crazy. We have to keep it together and get through. Our grandfathers did it. We can do it. And so
Wow.
that's what this book is about. And that it's then they do all kinds of stuff, that this is the theme of the book, I guess is what I'm saying. It's about, I nearly titled it The New Odysseus, because it takes Stephen 10 years to recover from everything that happened to him before his 21st birthday. But it's okay. At the end of that, he comes out in the last page of the book. He says, finally, I'm done. I can begin my life, because it took you 10 years to get it together, but you could do it.
Wow. This,
Mhm.
that's it's a different way to look at the immigrant experience when you look at the immigrant as someone who was in power in a country that was devastated.
It is scary because it was worrying, it is it's we're I wanted to go back to the 50s, because that's at the era when we were on top of the world. The United States was like the golden age, according to many people in this country. That's where we're going to go and make America great again too. That's what it's going to be. It was going to be like when Ozzie and Harriet and uh, uh, when it was the boom years for America then. And so, and it was for a lot of people, it really was. And there's huge opportunity. I wrote a sequel to this, you remember, Phil, and the sequel is called A Deal in Her Pocket. And it's essentially one of the things it's about the flip side. If you are gay, if you are colored, if you're a woman, even, if in 1959, none of the people on this screen right now could have their own checking account. Your checking account could say Mrs. your husband's name here, but it was not going to say your name. You didn't have a financial existence. In my lifetime, this changed. So we've really come a long way. I seem to write about that a lot. We've really come a lot longer way than we believe. And we sort of forget. But it's hopeful. It is really hopeful. We have pulled serious shit out of the fire. We can do it again.
I think this is a good way to shift over to Sara to talk about her book, Pause.
Yes.
And tell us a little bit, which is all about changes and things that we didn't used to talk about. So Sara, tell us where the idea for the book came, and then tell us a little bit about the book.
All right, thank you. Yeah, here is the book, Pause. And this is won the Somerset Award for Literary and Satire. It's not a satire, but it was an interesting genesis of this book, because previously I published science fiction and suspense with paranormal element. This one came from a journal that I kept in a difficult transition of my life. I was finally getting the courage to get a divorce from my abusive former husband, not then former, but and going through hell with menopause. And no one talks about menopause. My mother was a nurse. I learned nothing. No one told me anything. And it was like, are we just pretending that, these Crohn's, our life is over? And so, getting into those waters of being a single person and actually daring to try dating in my 50s. And it was horrible, really. And the journal, I wrote it to make myself laugh. And I did. I started laughing about it. And I thought, I had a writers group that we critiqued each other, and they encouraged me to transform this into a novel. And so I started with the idea of kind of a little bit of Bridget Jones' diary, these little diary entries where my protagonist is writing to herself, dear diary, queen of the hot flash here, and that sort of thing. But it also had some very serious elements of, I was raised in a household where my father was abusive. And so that pattern was carried on in ways that I hadn't realized until I was, midlife, what damage that had done to me and to my sisters and to my mother. And then, falling into a marriage that was repeating the same pattern. One day I looked in the mirror after a big rampage of rage by my former husband. And I looked in the mirror and I said, I'm becoming my mother and I need to stop. I need to get out of this. So this happens to my protagonist. And she also is exploring ways to deal with pretty severe menopause symptoms. Mine were unusually severe, almost debilitating. But at the same time, I had gotten a teaching job, teaching creative writing at our local university, Western Washington University. Excuse me, after my surgery, my voice is kind of dry.
Yes, I remember the cotton mouth.
Yes. So I was teaching and, working on this novel. And then I put it aside because my mother, well, our motto of the family was, we don't talk about it, basically. I didn't want to hurt my mother, who was the most beautiful, gentle, loving soul. And now that she had passed on, and I was working with Bookview Cafe by that time, bringing out earlier and new novels, I thought, well, I'm going to spruce this up and publish it. And as Brenda pointed out, the Me Too movement was really gaining steam at that time. So it was like time to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so I came up with a plot with these different themes. And another thing we don't talk about much is abuse and in the bureaucracy of the medical system in our country, which I had also encountered at an earlier time. So those three things were kind of themes that went into my heroine's journey.
Sara, I have to ask you, you wrote about something that was based on your own experience and your family.
Right.
I do a lot of writing about family secrets, which are fascinating. Everyone in a family sees things differently.
Oh, yeah.
I have to ask, how did you get past concerns about how other people in the family who had collaborated in keeping these things secret, like your sisters, how did you get past your concern about how they would feel seeing this?
Yeah, that was a tricky one. And as I said, I just really didn't want to hurt my mother. But I felt strongly enough about the need to put the story out there that I thought, well, kind of let the chips fall where they may. And my sisters are okay with it.
Do they read your work?
Say that again.
Do they read your work? Maybe they won't notice.
Yeah, they have read my novels before, and they kind of, it isn't their cup of tea, the science fiction and that sort of thing, but they praised me for this Pause novel and said, and my cousin who lives here also, she said, well, you were really brave to talk about that because they hadn't realized
how bad,
in that family circle hadn't realized how bad it was. I mean, my dad's behavior was so obvious, everybody knew, but didn't talk about it. I mean, it's just crazy. Right. So that I felt like I'm just going to do it now. Is the time. Yeah.
If not now, when,
Yeah, exactly.
You can't wait for everybody to die.
Right. And one of the things that I find is beginning to come out in some of my work is emotional abuse, which is just as devastating as physical abuse, but it's much harder to define and classify. Is this an abusive statement? Is this, my father telling me that I don't have to be pretty because I'm smart. I can get a job doing anything I want, where my sister had to be pretty because she wasn't smart and she needed to get married to find a man to take care of her.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there are just so many statements like that.
It's a backhanded compliment, but it's so backhanded, it does fall into that emotional abuse category. And
when you're young, you're so vulnerable to it. They've set your mental image, the ugly one, and you've got that for the rest of your life.
Yeah. Right. It's just all kinds of little things that do add up, and a lot of times you just don't realize it until that abuser is gone. And all of a sudden you're waiting for the backlash and it's not coming because they're not there anymore.
Right.
And it takes a while to realize that every comment is not a put down.
Yeah, and that's exactly the situation in the Pause novel. It was just, the slow buildup of the emotional abuse, like the putting the frog in the pot and the water slowly gets hotter. And you don't notice until it's turns the stage or that flips the page and it starts to become physical.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I knew I had to save myself and get out. And the same with my protagonist.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It makes me realize that one of the most powerful themes in fiction is the protagonist who reclaims their story from
Mhm.
a parent or a culture that says, you will be good at this, you will be bad at that, you can only do these things. And
Mhm.
actually, Brenda, I was really fascinated by that snippet from your book, in which the father has changed the way the culture handles the snake. That is really an amazing thing. We've seen a lot, particularly in Catholicism,
Mhm.
in our lifetimes, of Catholicism saying, we no longer believe you have to do this, women can't do this. Catholicism has changed things. The experience of going to a Catholic church in 1960 is completely different than it is now.
There is it, and that shows you that it, and I don't think that change came from within Catholicism. It was not like the Pope got up one morning and God had passed him the email. It is the culture outside pushing them, saying, well, why can't girls be altar girls?
Right.
Why do nuns always have to do the cleaning? uh there has been a steady push from outside forcing these institutions to change, and we have certainly seen it all within our lifetimes. And uh that there's no point in asking them to change. I think that if it had been left solely to the clergy and the Catholic Church, it would be exactly the way it was in 1960. What incentive do they have to alter?
Right. Right. And the entire business of priests abusing altar boys. I remember one of the accused in an interview said, well, we have to maintain control over these children. How else are we supposed to do it?
Oh,
Oh
And
my God.
like, is this 1550? Rather than 2000?
When I was growing up, my friends who went to Catholic boys' schools would talk about not wanting to stay after school with a certain teacher because they would be abused. But ironically, as we've seen a lot of that exposed in the Me Too culture, the shift now in terms of this type of abuse is somebody else who controls children, which is sports coaches.
oh yeah.
Seattle has just
Mhm.
had a huge outbreak of exposure of coaches who groom kids over a period of many years. And
Yeah.
it is really scary.
It is amazing. And you know that when you grind it back, when this really began, it was the Me Too movement, when women, which I think is probably the largest group of these of people who needed to speak out, finally stepped up. It was like Hollywood actresses who said, and they were able to leverage their celebrity to say, no, bad things happen and then things snowballed from there. And so this is a really major, what am I saying, sociological thing that happened
Yeah.
quite recently that we have seen happen.
Yeah. But how many of those actresses that came out are no longer actresses? They can't get a job in Hollywood because they said "Me Too."
Right.
Some of them
and and
survive,
and
but not all.
it's always tough in Hollywood anyways for older
Yeah.
actresses. I was so pleased that Jamie Lee Curtis and Michelle Yeoh did so well in awards because they're older women actresses. Jamie Lee Curtis is older than God. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So I have a question. Things have changed so much in terms of speaking out about abuse, whether it's marital or in your schools or in some kind of hierarchy. But a lot of us write books that are set back in the Victorian or the World War II.
Right.
How do you think that that authors are now revisionizing those times somewhat? Because you just can't write the way you used to. It nobody would want to read it about all this abuse. Nobody would accept it anymore.
You can read Charles Dickens if you want to see abusive teachers. You don't need to do it again, sort of. When I'm writing the Victorian novels, I didn't want to write the kind of thing where the heroine is a 21st century liberated woman zooming through the 19th century in her crinoline, slapping sexists around. I didn't really want to write that kind of book. I wanted her to stay within her time frame and her culture. And so she's so she's Marian Halcombe, who's the heroine of all these novels, is very, very careful to stay within her cultural parameters. And I'm sorry to say that what this gets her to do is she spends all of her time pushing men into she's swept through the country with fire and sword, and she says, "My brother-in-law, Walter, he saved us all." And because that's what everybody said then. Everyone says, "Oh, he saved us all." And then she can zoom off and do things, and he's left there holding the bag, and he makes him quite mad. He says, "You can't keep on doing this. I don't like it." And she says, "Well, it's not my fault that society does not allow me to do this. Pick up the ball and run." And so it's in the end it becomes kind of funny because he's constantly protesting. But it's I didn't want to write I didn't want to write like Bridgerton, you know what I mean, where they're completely throw over all of these strictures of the 1820s or whatever it is, and they just put the gas down and power through it, and I didn't want to do that. We were going to talk about research, and that is where you really I wanted you to really see what the culture was in 1861, and I know Sara is also doing this.
Well, I actually haven't written in that time period, but I agree completely that Bridgerton, I tried it and I just thought it doesn't fit. It's really not right, and a lot of novels are that way too. So yeah, I enjoy reading that period a lot. But
Sara, tell us a little bit about the Ariadne connection.
Oh, okay.
The one Thriller Award.
Yeah, this is the Global Thriller winner. And it came from my hippie backpacking trip through the Greek islands back in the day, in the 80s. And
it was pack was bigger than she is.
A huge backpack.
At the time of Mamma Mia.
Yes.
Yeah. And I always dreamed of Greece and visiting. I loved the mythology, the art, the architecture. I mean, it just fascinated me. So it was the most magical opening in my heart and mind to spend all those months traveling around. And you were camping among these old ruins on the coast of Crete. And my former boyfriend was along on this trip. And so I hadn't expected to be so fascinated by Crete and the Minoan culture, the little that we know about it. And so I started researching Ariadne, the story of the labyrinth, and my heroine is a new Ariadne, and she is a healer of a pandemic that starts. She's a scientist trying to find a cure, but she discovers that how she's actually curing people is by laying on of hands, and it's she's drawing on some kind of ancient powers connected with the labyrinth. So the novel, she's being pursued by everyone who wants her quote unquote secret, and it allowed me to visit various sacred sites in Greece, and she lands here and finds this. She's trying to learn how to control these powers because they're very wild and can be dangerous as well as healing. So I got to end up visiting various sites in the islands and ends up in Delphi, the magical home of the oracle. And well, it's a lot of fun, but also, with some themes of how tyrants run us. And she also needed to be liberated from her tyrannical father, who's in fact the Tyrannos, the ruler of this new country that he's cobbled together after World War III, or Gulf War II. Sorry, I'm mixing up. Wow. So yeah, that's the basis of it.
So that's what makes it a thriller. There's a government, political, international element to it.
Yes, yeah, definitely. There's the father who's running this new country, this new Pequotese country in the islands, and the bureaucracy of the pharmaceutical companies. They hired mercenaries to pursue her and grab her. And then also I enjoyed creating the new Amazon, this cult of these women warriors. Yay. And they want her as their head and their symbol of, the power that they can have. And so there's all these clashes of power going on. And this is set in the near future, where I'm also anticipating the geomagnetic poles are flipping. So that creates a lot of chaos as well. So I had a lot of fun with the research on that.
Yeah. It's always fun to create a extra nation into which you can do stuff.
Yeah.
You don't have to go do all this work of figuring out the history of, Mexico or, Indonesia or whatever it is. You can make it up, and they can do fun things that you make up.
Oh, right. Yeah, I did have a lot of fun creating trouble with this.
Yes, exactly.
I did hear rumor that you were working on a sequel to Ariadne.
I am. I have about a third of it written, and I kind of stalled out because of the various health and other things.
Yeah, I know. You and both you and Thor have been through the ringer.
And you're building a house too.
Yeah, my husband Tor and I, between this, we've had 7 surgeries in a year period. So kind of, and at the same time, we had launched on building a new house before all of this hit, and trying to get permits during the pandemic. And I mean, the whole thing has been wild, but I have those novels, and I'm going to finish it. Or I mean, the chapters I have. And it's a good excuse to go back to Greece for more research.
It is. And travel is just so much fun.
Hey, I wrote off a whole trip to Vegas with Cirque du Soleil tickets. One of my test books. No, was it a test? Yeah, it was a test book. Very moved.
Okay. So you've written back in sort of medieval times.
Right. Now, so
how do you do that with a modern sensibility around women and hierarchy and stuff?
Having grown up in the 50s, I do remember girls do not serve at the altar. They clean up after the men in the altar guild. And girls don't do that. And speaking up in public, don't be rude.
Yeah.
Anything I did outside of a very narrow path was rude, or crazy. Those were
crazy.
My mother's 2 biggest insults were to call somebody rude or crazy. And a lot of it was just for being human. So there's those ingrained memories that kind of helped me. And I got a lot of backlash on Guardian of the Balance, which is the first of my Merlin's Descendants books, because my heroine is a bit of a doormat. She nods very politely, yes, I'll do that. And then she goes off and does her own thing, but she does it in private. Yeah. And she doesn't tell anybody of her accomplishments. It's just done very privately. And the historical research or as Charles Smarr says on the comments, it's unladylike. Oh yeah, I got that a lot too. And it's not good for you to sweat.
Oh God, I know that.
So exercise was kept at a minimum. And you didn't discuss your weight. And there's one scene in Guardian of the Balance where the heroine is climbing up the sheer cliff of the crag, which is now Edinburgh Castle, but it was Dunedin at the time. And she finds the latrine chute, basically. And she crawls through that to gain a secret entrance to the castle. Wow. And she's very upset that her hips have broadened from 2 pregnancies, and she doesn't quite fit like she thought she should.
Oh, dear.
That was something we couldn't talk about, but she does. So a lot of the modern sensibility is in her head, but her actions are very much within 500 AD society. And I kind of kept that as I worked my way through British history. I did King Arthur and Merlin. I did the Magna Carta. I did two in the Elizabethan period, and then finally the preludes to the American Revolution, where I kept the history part as accurate as I could and inserted a descendant of Merlin who has to nudge events to make them happen the way we remember.
Oh, cool.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And, and they're available at Bookview Cafe, both as ebooks and print on demand. But the whole idea of, I didn't want to manipulate history, go into an alternate history.
Yeah.
I wanted to keep it accurate. And again, anytime I'm in a female point of view, her attitude is entirely different from her actions.
Yeah.
Except the last book, Guardian of the Freedom, where Georgiana just gets totally upset with the way her father and brothers are handling magic and politics, and she runs away from home, disguises herself in male clothing, and actually becomes a mercenary on the border of Austria and the Ottoman Empire. And this is based on a woman who had been Casanova's mistress. And when he left town on short notice with bill collectors on his heels, as usual, she realized she didn't want to go back to being someone's mistress. Which was the only life she knew, the only way she knew how to make a living. So she took her sword skills that Casanova had taught her in play as part of a game. She took those and became a mercenary and did things. And then there's later scenes in the book where she's supposedly spying for King George III, and he puts her into a rural plantation as governess to this guy's children and expects her to spy on the politics of the nation. That does not last terribly long, and she hightails it to Williamsburg and becomes a barmaid right next to the House of Burgesses, which is where all the political action really took place.
Oh, that's great. I'm someone, I grew up in Virginia, where basically, they quit teaching history after the Civil War because they didn't want you to know that they'd lost.
Right.
And they teach it entirely, and it's not a Civil War. It's the war between the states.
Yeah.
I got into trouble after we left Virginia and I finished high school in Tigard, Oregon. I got into trouble all over the place because I insisted on referring it to as the war between the states.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, I spent five formative years in Tidewater, Virginia.
Wow.
And so one of my proposed novels that I will get to, I promise I will get to, is 1690 in Virginia.
I want to put in a plug for something. They talk about America as becoming homogenized and speech is the same and food is the same. I just spent a couple months in Florida. It is
another world.
Boy, is Florida ever Florida. Up here, I will be talking with women I know, and, they'll talk about politics. And in Florida, if I ask other women about politics, they'll lower their voices and they say, my husband says, my pastor says, my brother says. And it's like, I've never heard them express an opinion. And I have a good friend in Florida who I've done a bunch of stuff with. I know she has a daughter she has grandchildren. She has a husband. We talk about this. I just found out she has another daughter who is lesbian,
Oh.
She never spoke about it. Well, of course, she moved. She lives in Oregon now.
Good move.
And
Wow.
when I went to the bank, the gentleman who was helping me change my mother's account he said, "You're from Seattle. My partner and I are going to move out west. We can't be in Florida." I had 4 gay couples tell me they were moving.
Wow.
And but it's so weird because people down there are very, very polite.
Yes.
They don't talk about things, and they have
No.
euphemisms for
No,
stuff.
and it's easier to leave than to stand and fight. And everybody has to make that decision for themselves. But what you're going to see is this huge drain of creativity and brains out of Florida. They're going to be racing with Mississippi to the bottom. I don't know what you can do about it. That's the way you're doing it.
Well, I was really intrigued because when I talk with people down there on all different political spectrums, they do not use harsh words. Even when they're saying terrible things about other people,
Right.
they'll say, "Those aren't the sort of people we want around our children," which is interesting because here in Seattle, where there is a great deal more political diversity than one would think, I've sat in a restaurant in North Seattle next to 2 businessmen who were talking about our governor and using words to refer to Christine Gregoire that I cannot say on this show.
Right.
Out in public, loudly, in the middle of a restaurant. And you would never hear that. In Florida, it's, what was it? There was some Texas politician who said, never say something that you couldn't whisper, never whisper something you couldn't convey with a wink. I'm butchering his description. But basically, it's in the South, if you are writing those characters, they aren't going to be saying the gross things. They're doing them, but the language is very soft.
Over in the side comments, Theo J. Williams, who is one of my favorite people in the whole world, writes, "Part of why I've loved being Wiccan clergy is that I get to work with high priestesses who are gleeful in their defiance of expectations from the uninformed about religious ladies. Watching these exchanges can prove an epic exercise in stifling hoots of laughter." And Cheryl Anderson says, "Not all of us in Florida are like this."
Okay.
And for a comment further up, she also says, "We have become fascists."
Well,
We're going to fight it, and we're going to win.
Yes.
That's what we're going to do.
And books like Pause and Adorn His Head are part of that.
Well, no, this is why you read novels. We're the first ones into the breach with this because you have to imagine it before you can do it. Before they could build that rocket ship to the moon, somebody had to write a novel about it. And once you imagine it, it can happen. Other people can pick up that ball and run, but we're going to imagine it, and then it'll be right. It'll eventually be all right.
Yeah, reading stories when I was growing up in my household and feeling like I was so isolated. I actually believed that I did not belong to my family, that the fairies had left me under a bush. But reading the stories allowed me to live a different life and imagine being free of these shackles. And I think it's so important that we do that.
So much of there's so many kids who escape through fiction, kids who live in libraries essentially, and it changes your life. When Robert Heinlein died, they had a memorial service for him at the Wallops Island NASA facility in Maryland. No one at that facility had ever met the man. They were not like personal connections or relatives or anything, but every single one of those rocket engineers had gotten into science because they had read Rocket Ship Galileo when they were 8.
Wow.
And so, his work changed their lives. All these, you're not talking about the major, you're just all the worker bee scientists in there that are getting the satellites up into the air. They went into that because of him.
Yes.
So
that's
our job.
Whoopi Goldberg was a kid watching Star Trek, and she went running to her mother, "Mama, there's a black gal on the TV, and she's on the bridge of a spaceship.
Yay.
And that really opened her eyes
Mhm.
to the fact that she could do anything she wanted.
Mhm.
She became an Oscar-winning actress.
Well, you just look at the bridge of the Enterprise, and it's, it was seminal for its time, but it made it possible. Someone imagined it, and then we realized it could be done.
Right. And yes, Star Trek can be kind of a utopian fantasy at times.
Yep.
But Roddenberry had a genius for putting controversial issues in front of us and letting us look at them sideways so that we are not blinded by our own prejudices.
Mm-hmm.
He was genius at that.
Yeah. And that's why the really forward-thinking science fiction and fantasy writers in our genre really, we need these people. We need these people to say these things, and I think it'll work out. I'm optimistic. I named this little series of 20th century novels the Cockeyed Optimist series, because that's what it's going to be about. It's going to be about that. We can do this. We can do it. It's going to be all right. The convolutions that the heroine of the second novel, A Deal in Her Pocket, goes into to get her gay friends okay is astounding. I'm horrified at her myself, but you can work it out, and you can live in the environment you're in, and you can still work it out.
Ladies, Bob just reminded us that we're down to about 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm glad you're able to translate. I saw his message and I was completely confused.
Okay. Okay. We have things we need to do.
Okay.
The good news is
Bob's about to hop in.
We're all doing great. The bad news is I'm about to interrupt the show.
That's not bad news. Come on in, Bob. Tell us what's on your mind.
Yeah. So there it is.
Oh, golly gosh, what's on my mind? One, I never got to hear about how much fun it is to wash an elephant.
Oh, I did just love it. It was great.
Thank you, Sara. We're going to have you come back sometime.
Okay, I would love to. This is a great group.
Yeah.
We'll get you on here with Deborah Godfrey. She went to India for a month or so, and sent back pictures of taking an elephant ride. So we can get you on together, and you can share notes.
Let's do it. Let's do a show on travel.
Yes.
We could do that, baby.
Show on travel and how it feeds into our writing.
Exactly.
I'm going to
you
Japan
could
next
do that.
week.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm there for you.
Well, I tell you what, since I've got Karen and Brenda and Phyllis here, who own one show a month of this podcast, figure it out, make it happen. We'll all be proud.
We'll do a travel show.
If you're doing it, I don't have to.
Exactly.
Let those women take over. Yes.
Yes. The first Sunday of the month, we do.
What is on my mind otherwise? It is the joy of getting to hear a perspective that isn't my own. Because, I know my own perspective is pretty damn good.
This guy grew up in Texas with 8 sisters.
Wow.
He knows when to shut up and listen.
Oh, good God. Yeah, shutting up and listening is something you learn to do down there, I tell you. But, I loved hearing your perspective on the women on the bridge of the Starship Enterprise. I was lucky when I was a short little kid. That's what was on TV. That's what I got to watch. I didn't realize what a big deal it was until later. So that's a fun thing. But speaking of big deals, BQ Press, we try not to fool ourselves into thinking what big deals we are, but we have some great people involved in this project. Karen, who runs our website for us, bless her heart, That wasn't a bad joke, Karen, because she is editing an anthology for us, Alternative Truth, Southern Edition. Bless their hearts.
Mhm.
Which one?
Say that again.
Yeah, which one is she doing?
I'm doing the Alternative Truth Southern Edition. Bless their
Okay.
hearts.
Okay.
I think that's a great title.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a working title. I hate long titles, as writers sometimes find out. But you know what? We do the title that works, and if that's the title that works, we'll make it work. Because B Cube Press. Okay, thank you, Karen. I've been watching that last week. Didn't find it yet. So, and we also have up right now, open for submission, is Alternative Leadership. And you've heard me make reference to Deborah Godfrey. I tend to refer to her as Saint Deborah. She just, without her, we'd be lost. Is doing, she's reading right now or editing Madam President, her her collection of not collection, anthology that she's editing for us over the basic premise of women in power in leadership roles.
Mhm.
And that was so much fun that she actually has put together a call for alternative leadership, which is leadership for the non regular leadership, I guess is the best way to put it, the underrepresented in leadership. And so far, I've been looking at the submissions. We were open for about a week, and we've got 25 submissions, of which it's like, oh, well, I could just buy all these and have a good book. No, I love it. BQ Writers put out the best stuff. I really love humor. I love redemption. I love thoughtfulness. I love politics. It's great. So we have those open calls out there on our website, bqpress.com. And we're also doing it on Moksha. And sadly enough, we even have to pay our writers, which really means that it
Frosts you. It frosts you.
Hey, it means I don't have to spend my money polishing brass on my yacht.
It's a rowboat.
Hey, be nice. It's not a rowboat. It's a canoe.
Okay.
And it's a lake canoe. Very fun canoe to go out on the lake with. In fact, someday when we're not so time stamped, I'll tell you the story of how we dropped the canoe, putting it in the water, and punched a hole in the bottom of the fiberglass 60 miles upriver from where I live. And we made
duct
it.
Tape. I want to do an anthology on how duct tape saved the world.
Yes.
Oh, yes. You did beer already. Why not?
Yeah.
For the record, it was candle wax that we used.
Well,
We took all the candles we had and we melted them and poured them into the bottom over the hole and treated it like a fiberglass.
wow.
We're geniuses, you know. So anyway, yeah, I know it's just like and upcoming appearances. We are going to be at Oricon.
Yay.
We are going to be
at weekend
live at Oricon.
We're going to be at Monument Con this June. Okay, that's up in South Dakota. Yeah. Don't get me going on what a hotel room South Dakota on the weekend before 4th of July is. And then we're going to head out for our a great little convention, Missoula and MissCon, where those of you who watch regularly know that we have Jim Wright and David Gerald come on once a month. And we're going to do them live for MissCon, and we might even drag Robert Sawyer into it too, since he's a pretty cool guy and a pretty good guest to have. So that's what's going on in BQ Press. So, and Sara, thank you so much. And just a reminder, I may not be the book you were hoping I would find and put up.
Oh,
But we have your book.
well, there. Yep.
Yeah,
There it is.
there's pause.
There's pause.
Yeah, I'm hoping people will buy it.
Mhm.
And then I'm hoping that people will buy this book here for
Those are so good. So
Yeah.
fun.
The first book in the series is free.
Oh, which one are we talking about? Marian Halcombe. Yes, it is.
And the
because-
subtitle is The Adventures of the Most Dangerous Woman in Europe.
Yeah,
Very-
it is. They're thrillers, and they're fun. And like all good entry level drugs, the first one is free. You have to think of me as Walter White with just that one little hit of crystal meth, guaranteed to hook you.
Well, it's fitting that Brenda should write a book about the most dangerous woman in the world. And Phil, I apologize, but I could not get the glass dragon image you sent me up. But I
Okay.
will tell you this, guys, the glass dragon, if you've ever want to read a book that is full of adventure, innocence, and joy,
Mhm.
at the same time diving deep into some what this naive young writer named Irene Radford thought about dragons and fantasy, it is brilliant. And so you might wait for her to get it out again because she's re-releasing it, but it's a brilliant book.
It will be out the last Tuesday in June, which I believe is the 27th, in both ebook and print. I realize people have loyalty in buying ebooks, especially from whoever provided their device, but you can buy it from the Bookview Cafe. I get 90% of the royalties. And it's we have instructions on the site on how to cross-load onto your reader. So support independent publishing.
That is important. And last but not least, I just put this one up because I like to. I believe, Karen, you're in this book.
Yes,
And
that's the one with the story. I'm trying to remember which one is in that, but yes, I'm in there somewhere.
yeah, and this one was God, I forget her name from my co-editor. I can't see the image; it's not big enough for my old eyes. But Phil helped me put this one into reality. Everybody here should know that BQ Press started when I gave Phil a call one day and says, "You know what we are to do?" And she said, "You're crazy." But this is,
And I meant it.
Yes.
Putting out an open call anthology in 100 days.
and we beat it. We did it in '99,
Yeah.
and it's
The,
bestseller.
the co-editor in this was Jess Faraday, and this includes Louise Marley's amazing story, "The President's Wife is Missing."
Oh my God, that was a great story.
Yeah.
Louise Marley has never written us anything that isn't like. I joke often that Karen G. Anderson is the only person that gets accepted just by signing her name to a piece of paper. But Louise Marley is right up there too, because Louise Marley has given us gold every time she's written anything. It's been gold.
I think it was the first Alternative Truths. Louise Marley gave us The Wall, which was really amazing.
Yeah. Well, anyway, you'll notice it's relatively inexpensive because we have it set as cheap as it can be as a
Incentive.
indictment. No, it's the indictment special.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. I remember that. Yes, very
Cover is
good.
perfect for the
You need to
indictment.
celebrate.
Yeah.
Yes, please.
And so that said, Sara, thank you. Karen, you want to get any more last words out of these people?
I think we're set. This was a great bunch of guests. Everyone should come back on. Sara, we definitely want to hear more about. I want to have you on the travel show.
Yes, yes.
I would love that. That would be fun.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a few
Thank you.
adventures for travel too.
Bye.
Bye-bye.